We're talking about VTubers today.
That tuber.
I've only just learned what these are, so I'm very excited for this presentation because this is a world I'm completely unaware of. But what the hell is that potato thing?
It's a tuber.
Well, that's a VTuber. That's a virtual tuber. Do you get it?
Okay, that's good.
That's from when someone at the very start of lockdown, some CEO of some company accidentally turned herself into a potato and did an entire Zoom call with a potato.
That's good.
If you are anything like me, the last 12 months of your life has had VTubers dotted in and out on your Twitter feeds, on your YouTube suggestions, and I want to talk about who they are, what they are, and how they are. But before we talk about VTubers, let's go a bit further back in time and talk about idols.
Mm-hmm.
See, I would say that idols are the precursors to VTubers, and similarly rooted in Japanese culture. This is AKB48, which is a girl group, which is an idol group, which interestingly has 48 members.
That's too many.
Really,
I'm just saying
copying
it.
the S Club model.
As a blazing squad.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous number, but this is like really like the logical end to idols, basically. And idols really came into being around the late 60s, early 70s. And they're very much like celebrities in like the UK or the US, in that they're sort of, particularly like those late 90s, early noughties celebrities of really manufactured. They're there to sell something essentially, and that selling might be selling the music that they make, but the selling might also be selling the brand that they've made a deal with, run by shady sort of businessmen in the background kind of thing.
Louis Walsh vibes.
Yeah.
Idols are a little bit more intense, I would say, than like what we would consider a celebrity, particularly because what they're selling is really the fantasy of the idol. And the idol is this like perfect public image. Essentially, they are young, they're brilliant at what they do, and normally they're single. So then they have that sort of restriction on their lives, and they don't do things wrong. When they do things wrong, there's often a backlash to that, both from the public, but also from their own internal agencies, the people who like their managers, etc. And you may have, a few years ago, heard a story about an idol who shaved off all of her hair. This was a big story, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, of a girl who basically, she was an idol in, I think actually in AKB48, and she was pictured by a paparazzi on a date, and idols aren't allowed to be on dates. And as a consequence, she basically got suspended from her job, and in like penance, in repentance, she filmed a video of her like apologising profusely and shaved off all of her hair.
Oh, no.
I'd heard of stuff like this from like lots of like K-pop bands and
K-pop stuff is very similar actually, but we're talking specifically about Japanese stuff in this instance, because I would say that's where VTubers kind of originate, and where they're most powerful would be how I would describe VTubers. Idols will do singing, they'll do dancing, they'll do acting, they'll go on TV shows, on variety shows, and they'll find themselves in the public eye, but they don't have an awful lot of control over their image. And as I say, they get punished if they deviate from what their image is in the public eye. I was first introduced to idols through this group.
I thought you were going to say I was an idol in the 90s.
Well, this is Morning Musume. Morning Musume were a group that I grew up with, essentially. When I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, I was a bit of a weeaboo, as was the style at the time. And I came across Morning Musume. Morning Musume were this girl group, with lots of different iterations. They're essentially generations of morning musume. They basically still go today. There are still morning musume out there releasing music. They add new members basically every year, and this is like the 4th generation. And this is the morning musume that I was really into.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old girl, and you're seeing these other, young girls out there singing and dancing and on TV and acting and doing all of these wonderful things in these fantastic like costumes, and you're thinking, I really want to be like that. I want to be in morning musume. And actually, it was kind of achievable for young girls, because the youngest girl in morning musume was 11 years old.
Oh no.
Yeah. An age range of between 11 and 25 years.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
And say, as a 13-year-old, you're thinking, I can be in morning musume. I want to be in morning musume. As this 12-year-old, I was, watching all of the stuff they're in. A lot of the things were fan translated, so it would be maybe a year later. And there were girls in this group who were basically the same age as me. There are literally girls in this photo who were born within the 6 months of me being born. And so it was a really achievable goal. Well, I say achievable, maybe not achievable for a white girl from East London, but like
in the mind
this was
of a 12-year-old.
Yeah. Like this is something you could be. And it was only a couple of years later when I was still into them. I was still watching their stuff and listening to their music. I was watching one of their concerts. They would do these concerts to big stadiums with tens of thousands of people in them. I was watching it and enjoying it, and then it suddenly dawned on me, the noise from the audience, it was so deep. It was all men. And I suddenly felt so uncomfortable about this existence, this thing. And the more you look into it, the more you sort of realise that these sorts of idols are a little bit like they have some shady things behind them. Not just the fact that they're exploiting, young girls to do, to sell things, essentially, to sell their existence, to market themselves. But when you look at the agencies behind them, and Morning Musume was part of a thing called Hallow Project, which is a big agency that has lots of idols, not just girl groups, but also like individuals, a few boy groups here and there as well. And like the working practices of the idols were not great. Like they were working ridiculous hours. They were maybe, rehearsing, recording, going on like TV shows, filming, acting, performing at concerts, and like you're expecting a 12-year-old to do this entire ridiculous job of being a pop star, essentially.
That's intense.
And yeah, very, very intense. And they weren't exactly getting paid well for it.
I've heard like a lot of these groups are like some of them have been investigated. I mean, I've heard this about K-pop groups, like some of them have been investigated for like slave labor because they're working like less than minimum wage and sometimes, well, like basically indentured servitude. And this is like not so different to like the worldwide like music industry generally, is that they're operating on like they come to a big business, they get a massive, they get a loan to put themselves out there, and then all of that they have to be working 24/7 for this business that still controls them, but they're like living off debt, and the whole time they are working to like pay back this business the entire time, even as they like look like they have expensive lifestyles or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think the main thing that I take away from the existence of idols in this culture, and I don't think it is a uniquely, Japanese thing. I think that you're right in that there's like, Britney Spears and the Spice Girls. They all had that same situation. I think it was just a little bit more intense for me because these are like literally like children.
Yeah.
Like in this photo, the girl on the top row slap bang in the middle, she's 11 years old in this photo. Well, on that lovely note of, exploitation of child labour, let's meet Kizuna Ai. Kizuna Ai is essentially a virtual idol. some would argue that she isn't the first VTuber. There have been previous virtual fake anime girls who basically do the idol job. Hatsune Miku is a really famous one, who's considerably older than November 2016. But I think the difference between Kizuna Ai and the people that went before her, or the characters that went before her rather than people, I guess, is that this is done essentially live. You've got an actress who has motion tracking, and it could be just facial motion tracking, or like torso motion tracking, or it could be entire full body motion tracking. And she does some of the same things that traditional idols do. She releases music. She goes on to TV shows. She has like concerts and such. But she's uniquely on the internet. She does some gaming content as well, which you would expect from an internet personality. But I think the way there's this through line between this idol culture and Kizuna Ai, this supposedly first VTuber, is really clear, because she's also giving that sort of persona. She's essentially this fantasy that the viewers, that the fans can put on to, like, they can put on to that persona, with her being not real, with her not being a real person. There's some less problematic elements to that.
Right, so there's not a real person who's like dating life as being restricted and who has to publicly humiliate themselves if they step out of line in any way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really good things. And like, you can technically do these sorts of things from home or from an office or whatever, and you're not having to like traipse across the country to different concerts, because the actor can just sort of sit there in an anonymity, essentially. You can go to the shops and no one's going to know who you are. Kizuna is wildly successful. She has 2.91 million subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
And the thing everyone thinks is, how exactly does this work? Well, to become a VTuber, you essentially need 4 things. It can be simplified a little bit, but these are the 4 essential components you need. You need a 3D avatar, some kind of motion capture, and that motion capture could just be facial motion capture, or it could be whole body motion capture. You need some sort of rendering software to render that motion capture into with the 3D avatar, and then you need a streaming platform to put it on. And that's a really, really simple premise, essentially. You don't need millions and millions of what kind of currency you're using to make costumes, or to book out arenas, or to do makeup and all of that sort of thing. You can just concentrate on the character.
This is why I'm starting a Patreon for motion capture gear.
Gonna replace Rage with a cartoon.
Well, the thing is, you don't really need motion capture gear either. You can just use a camera. You can use a webcam, and it tracks the points on your face even without like dots or anything on your face.
Right.
A lot of that software is also open source, so you can just download it. You or I could go out there and download it.
Kind of like Snapchat filters and that kind of thing.
Yeah. In fact, Snapchat filters are very, very similar. 3D avatars as well are also not actually difficult to get. You can go on Fiverr right now and order a 3D avatar for VTubing with all the facial rigging for about 200 quid and get a relatively decent VTuber setup, essentially. Because this is so simple to make, it's enabled VTubers to have a boom. And in comes hololive. 99.9% chance that if you have seen a VTuber out there on your Twitter feed or in your YouTube recommendations, there is a significant chance that they are from hololive. Hololive is an agency, just like Hello Project with Morning Musume. Hololive essentially turns people into VTubers. They take people from auditions, give them a character, and then give them a YouTube channel. Obviously, there's a slightly more intense audition process than just, oh, you're good. They go through like screen tests and all sorts of things, apparently. But they are wildly, wildly popular.
to some extent that makes the person behind the sort of cartoon character like even more replaceable, because if something happens to them, they get tired or they want to quit or whatever, or they ask for a pay rise, or they don't want to work one day, they can just be replaced with someone else and nobody has to know the difference.
Yeah. Hololive as an agency has 5 channels with over 1 million subscribers, which is really, really impressive. And they really, really ballooned in 2020. Around the time of lockdown starting, essentially, around the time of the coronavirus pandemic, is when I first noticed them. That's when they first started popping up on my radar through fan translations. People who would find a clip or a stream that they found was very, very funny, or they enjoyed, or was cute or whatever, and they would then translate it and put that clip on YouTube, and then those clips would get millions of views, or they would get put on YouTube, on Twitter, and be shared around the world.
Yeah, I was seeing a couple of those.
yeah, because exactly, they just find themselves in places. And one of the problems is YouTube is so good at recommending things that if you watch one video of a VTuber, your entire feed is VTubers. And it will take months for that to disappear of just not watching these VTubers.
My entire feed is like vegan cheese. Try out this vegan meat substitute.
My feed is vegan entrepreneurship.
Just horrible.
Yeah.
They're primarily a Japanese-speaking organisation, but because of these fan translations and the massive pickup in English-speaking fans, this agency essentially decided to create some English-speaking VTubers. And to show you quite how popular they were, they started the 5 English-speaking VTubers in September of 2020, so about 3 weeks before we started our channel.
Can't wait to hear the comparison.
One of them, Gaogura, now has over 2.2 million subs on YouTube.
Like and subscribe.
Which is a number that we will never achieve. But it is kind of wild that in that enormous growth, hololive has some comparisons, let's call it that, to those traditional idol agencies around not just because they do auditions and stuff, but also because they take quite a lot of the reward for some of these success stories. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly how much these VTubers are earning, but some people were saying somewhere between 10 and 20%, which is significant if you're making lots of money. Like, some of them are making maybe like $10,000, $50,000 dollars a month, the big ones. Which even on 10% you're still going to be getting loads. But compare that to like a traditional streamer, that's not a lot. And in that ecosystem, it's weird to get so little of your revenue, I guess.
Yeah, I guess for some people it's like it's worth it for the consistent, like, once you're chosen or whatever, then you're they make sure that you're successful. Yeah,
because that is one of the things, is that like you wouldn't get the 3D model, you wouldn't get the exposure. Like, Gaogura wouldn't get 2.2 million subs from just creating a Twitch channel or whatever. That's not going to happen.
But do you get the days off?
So going from hololive to what happens next. So this technology is so ubiquitous now. You can just get a camera, a laptop, and a 3D model from Fiverr, and you can become a VTuber.
Poopy2 gas.
With more than 10% of the...
Poopy2 gas, it does say Poopy2.
Also fart. That was the first word I saw.
This is Code Miko. Code Miko is an independent VTuber, essentially. She's also from America. She's an English-speaking VTuber. And she's also not anime-based as well. At the time of recording, she's currently banned from Twitch.
Oh, damn. Why?
So she's been banned a couple of times.
Did she show
Often
her virtual boobs? That's why women usually get banned from Twitch, isn't it?
No, I think in the most recent example, she showed an email. She was interviewing someone, and that person sent her like a picture of an email of some abuse that she'd received, and that email had like the abuser's email in it, and that got her banned for 2 weeks.
Oh, that was unexpected.
Because of like privacy laws, essentially. But I suspect, like, Code Miko, I don't think is going to be the big one. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to have a big VTuber come up. And the sort of person who, and the sort of character really, who will be known by your mum, kind of thing.
Right.
Your mum will know this character. That's the level of big I think that we're going to get sometime.
I'm going to be the most famous VTuber that's ever been. I'm going to be a household name. They're going to invite me...
You're going to be...
to I don't know what.
BBC Breakfast.
Yeah.
But like we joke, but like that is genuinely what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
we're going to see someone turn big. I don't think it's going to be Code Miko. I think she's a little bit too into the gaming side of things. Like I think she's too much of a gamer. Like I think she's a little bit too like, edgy, I guess, is kind of the word I would use to describe her. And I think because of that, she's never going to become like super mainstream. But I think we will at some point in the next 5 years have someone so big that you will be unable to avoid them. And yeah, that's going to be an interesting time. So that's what I predict is going to happen in the next 5 years. We're going to see a big VTuber come up and be ubiquitous. And when that happens, I want you to come back to this video and say, oh, wow, Jen was right.
Wow, Jen, you're so smart.
I'm so clever, aren't I? Look how brilliant I am. Yeah.
It's going to be you, Jen.
Yeah.
Oh, am I going to be the VTuber?
Yeah. I feel like an old anthropologist who's just discovered their grandkids' TikTok, you know, and just like trying to ethnographize the youth these days.